I want to take a couple of minutes to thank the League of Women Voters for being part of this program, coming to us with the idea of bringing this film to Janesville. And I also need to recognize Wisconsin Public Television. They have a program called Reel to Reel, and that allows libraries to bring these films to their communities. And so they were really wonderful to work with in order to get this particular film. I've talked with our presenter for the discussion section, and we have decided that we're not going to introduce the film at all. You know it's about Wonder Woman, and we're really curious what you're going to get out of it. So instead of me telling you what you're going to see, you're just going to watch, and then we'll talk about what you get out and what you feel like is a worthwhile discussion. I do want to introduce Kelly Parks Snider. She is the co-creator, co-founder of Project Girl, and in a nutshell, they educate about media literacy. And that's kind of their mission, is to really show you what you get out of advertising and ways that you can stay educated about what you're seeing in advertising and in media.
I want to thank you all for coming tonight. And as Melissa said, you know, there's a lot in that movie. And their takeaways are, there's so many things. And, you know, I think that there was a huge deliberateness in that film director to bring in a lot of information and then to just have it sit out on a platform to be discussed. So I'd really like to do that tonight. It's always funny. Amy came up here with her Wonder Woman outfit. Sometimes I show up, and I've done these talks quite a bit, and there might be a whole room full of comic groupies, which I never paid any attention to Wonder Woman. I don't even watch TV, and I was like the horse girl woman who was just out in nature doing my thing. So when that happens, I just hand it over to them, and they start talking about comic art, and it's really fun. And sometimes I have a room full of young girls, like we have this wonderful girl leader here, Madison, who's in 3rd grade, who's getting a badge from Girl Scouts for being here. And sometimes the room is full of young people. And other times it's filled of people of all ages. So anyway, I am here. I've got some ideas of things we can discuss, but we can discuss all kinds of things. So just a little background on me. I am an artist. I make things. I combine art with activism. I think that art is a tremendous way to look at social justice issues. I think it has something to do with the fact that when you're either interacting with art or you're viewing art, there's this opportunity to focus. You know, focus on something which is a disconnecting from all this clutter, this media, this advertising, all of these things that seem to keep saturating and distracting us. And it's through that interaction that what I'm trying to do is never tell people what to think or what to feel, but just to get people thinking and to get people feeling and looking at something more carefully. And I just think that the art has a tremendous opportunity to do that. As an activist, I like to push. I like to push because the tension's good. It makes you get deeper and think more deep about different issues. But as an artist, I'm more interested in opening up your eyes, and so that we can look at some of these issues that they've been talking about a little more carefully. So anyway, let's get started. I co-founded, the reason that the art and the activism is one piece, but I co-founded an organization that's based out of Madison, Wisconsin. It started there 12 years ago, but it's actually, it's national scale now, called Project Girl. And you may have heard about it. Project Girl is an organization that combines art, media literacy, and girl-led and boy. I work with boys all the time now, activism, into a program that helps young people become better interpreters of this media-based culture and advertising that surrounds them. It helps them look at this world more critically so that the effects of that don't affect them. Because I know that knowledgeable kids are the kind of kids that can look at this sort of this media-saturated world, and they can come up with their own conclusions and control some of those decisions that they made, because knowledgeable kids are the ones that can make their own decisions. So that's sort of the tie-in for all of the reasons that I'm here. I have very little faith in Hollywood. And in fact, I look at that show, that movie, and it blows my mind. And the violence, the over-sexualization, it's remarkable. And what I'd like to do tonight is, I'm working on a new art exhibition, and it's an exhibition looking at abuse, privilege, equality, and fairness. And I'm collaborating with various thinkers and people, activists, and looking at how that plays out in gender, race, education, environment, about 12 different areas. And one of the areas I've been collaborating with is studying the history of women and paralleling that with the history of advertising and looking at these massive shifts, which is just what our director was doing, is looking at these different decades and seeing, like, what's going on here? Why are women's values, their roles, how they define themselves, what's important to them, their attitudes, how they define work, how did all these things shift in decades, and why did they shift? And so I've recently completed this mural that's 20 feet, and what I'd like to do is start at the turn of the century in the Progressive Era, which was a mighty time, and women were quite a force during that time. And that's also the same time that advertising started. And I'd like to walk through a few decades and talk about that and really celebrate some of these women heroes who, during societal crisis, really came up with their own conclusions about what really needed to be done. And then I'd also like to talk about, just show you some of the everything that I have learned. I learned from young girls and boys. Through my Project Girl, we had an advisory group of young people. We continue to have an advisory group of young people. And what I'd like to do is just go over using art and using an art exhibition that travels nationally that some of the young girls created, and some of the work is mine, talk about what they've taught me and what they've shown me, because it's very, we've all got historical formats that we can look back at and we can say, wow, things have changed. Young people don't. When you're asking them to interrogate this culture, they've grown up in it. They don't see anything wrong with it. So it's a very tricky, tricky approach. And the approach that Project Girl chooses to use is like the real project with girls, is that we want young girls to step up to the plate. Young girls, I work with first graders. I work with primarily middle school and high schoolers, but we want to give them the information so that they can bust all these lies and all this misrepresentation. And so I want to show you a little bit about how we do that. And then finally, I always believe that when you have a crowd, you want to have an action plan. And so I'd love to talk about that. And then if any point you feel like you want to go a different direction or you want to jump off that conversation, we can easily do that. I went up and I grabbed some of these images. But like the director, what I really do want to do today is just talk about some of these massive shifts. Corporations and powerful entities spend an enormous amount of money on trying to control the way we feel about ourselves. The game that advertisers, and when I'm talking about advertising, I want you to think about, in media, I want you to think about where is it that you see commercials. Madison, like the places that you see commercials is the word for, is what I think of as media. And I always clarify that because I just want everybody to be on the same page and understand, because I'm going to use that word a lot. So in pursuit of profits, corporations go to just irresponsible directions in trying to control the way that we feel about ourselves. Their main goal is, in advertising, is to create anxieties. And they want to convince us that we're okay, but we're not great. And we will only be great if we buy whatever it is they're trying to sell. And advertisers have bypassed adults, and they have really focused in on young people. And they do that for a lot of reasons. They want loyalty. They don't think young people, they think they're vulnerable and that they don't know the answer and they can easily be fooled. And they are counting on young people to nag, us parents. And we know, that it works. And so anyway, we're going to talk a lot about young people. So in this world, I feel like there's these economic wheels that turn, and they turn in one direction, in a direction for profits, and they have very little concern about our young people. And it feels to me as though the absurd has become the living reality for a lot of our young people, as you see watching this film. I mean, it's appalling, some of the violence and some of these over-sexualized images that have just been, they've been normalized, but they've also been, in my opinion, more glamorized. So I told you a little bit about Project Girl. Here's just a few pieces of the art that will be part of this new exhibition. But as you see, there's a mural back there. That's just to give you a little scale of this mural. But let's go through this mural a little bit. So during the Progressive era, women were a force. As you know, at that time, it was the turn of the century, and women were very interested in mending a lot of the problems that were occurring because of the industrialization. So we had issues of, lots of immigrants migrating. Our cities were becoming just super full. We had diseases. We had children who were, child labor, issues. We had tremendous amounts of disease. And we had this word that I love that reminds me of Wonder Woman, and it's called maternalistic politics. So it was this collective of women, many of them, working in more of a charity sort of position. Women didn't even have the vote at this point. And women were out there in the streets, and they were making significant changes. I want to just say, we had Harriet Tubman, who was, we women demand an equal voice. We shall accept nothing less. We had Susan B. Anthony. I mean, I just love some of these things that they're saying, and I honestly think they're things that we are still saying now. There never will be a complete equality until women themselves help to make laws and elect lawmakers. Harriet Tubman, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves. That's an amazing one. Another one from Ida Wells that I love. Something must show that the African American race is more sinned against than sinning it, and it seems that it has all fallen on me to do this. So, I mean, these were just these tremendous women that, that saw conditions that needed to be undone, and they stepped up to the plate and went for it. So here's again just summing. A lot of those reforming women are in the center there, and so that epic battle of the women's vote, which started in 1848 and then wasn't finished up until 72 years later. So it was really fun to find some of those images. But here's something interesting about advertising. So as you see, there's no photos because photography wasn't even a part of this. Because of massive markets, we had these massive groups of people who were leaving the farms, coming into the cities. We had all kinds of ways of transporting goods. We had the railroad at this time. We had the interstate road systems. We had the mail. All of this was just starting. So people knew there was lots of profits. There's lots of money to be made. So that's why this whole thing of advertising started. And I was working with a friend of mine who's a historian on the history of advertising. And, these two images right here are very interesting. Women are now always the most targeted. Marketers target us. Besides children, they target us the most because we make most of the decisions on purchasing. They knew that even back then. But they needed to teach women to look at advertising because prior to this, there were very few magazines. You might see some seed catalogs, things like that. But anyway, so those Where's Waldo's books? Okay, this was set up. That's the thing I can compare this to. So what they would do is you could see the awkwardness of these illustrations. They would hide products in these illustrations, and then there would be a blank space, and then you had to identify those, you had to go find those products in the magazines and put the page number. So that was like their training method for getting women to pay more attention to magazines and to look for products. And the things that they were selling, because prior to this, most people made everything that they needed. But fashion became important at the turn of the session. Ready-made clothes, hairstyles, very little makeup, mail order catalogs. Food and safety marketing became an issue with the Food and Safety Act of 1906. Prior to that, there was lots of problems with food. I mean, putting putting sawdust in flour bag. There was all kinds of abuses and things that happened in that. And then we go into the 20s, which these are my daughter's favorite. Like, if there was a time where she wanted to be having fun, it would be in the 20s. I think of the 20s as sometimes a little bit like where we are right now with young girls. But the 20s was this huge change from this collective concern for others that we saw with the progressive era, these maternalistic sort of politics, a lot of individualism. And there was like a huge rise with marketing. And so as liberating as this was for some young girls, because there was the whole sexual allure and all of that sort of thing, which was different. It was a time of much more selfishness, which is what advertisers do. What they try to do is to convince us that it's okay to just do everything for ourselves. So the 20s was a huge time. Lots of African American artists. Never in the history of America have we seen art that has come out of like the 20s. Here's some more. I thought you guys would all like this, you Women League voters. We had the 30s. The 30s was an interesting time. So this was prior to the Wonder Woman. She came out in 41. But in the 30s, October, like 1929, there was a crash, and all of the, we had some real economic instabilities. And women were working in the workforce, and what happened was there was so much tension between women and men because there were so many issues with people lack of jobs that they ended up. Many women were mandated to not work, and if you were married, you were definitely sent home. And so if you look at a lot of the advertising was, not at all a representation to what was going on in the society. It was all this very conventional. The movies were very sparkly, and they were trying to kind of distract people from what went on. Now, I'm going to fly through a few more years to the 40s, to World War II. And they touched on this, I think, in the movies quite a bit, about that. Here we had in the 30s that women were mandated to be working at home, and then with the World War II, then we had this huge surge of women going and working in the factories and going. Women were being paid 62 cents on the dollar at this time, whereas in the 30s and the 20s it was 50 cents. So there was a huge surge in them making more money. And they had a huge role. Their duty was to be a part of the success of that World War II. And then we had the 50s, and they talked a lot about the 50s and that. Let's go and look at, the 60s and the 70s was an exciting time. We had the civil rights movement. The women in the second phase of feminism, it was different for African American women than the middle class white women. The white women were most concerned about fairness and equality, and then the African American women were really concerned about survival. So here's there's one of the panels. And then we get to the end of what's going on right now, and a lot of images that are really, inappropriate for anybody to see. But I want to talk to you a little bit about Project Girl. So Project Girl believes that the young girls are our solution. And just like I said earlier on, I think that all of us are the solution. I really have very little faith in corporate world in making a change in all of this. The media is inescapable. So what I believe in all the work that I've done with girls is that the approach is not this preachy approach at young girls of saying don't watch. I think the solution is to get young people to look at this stuff more carefully. We took a lot of our direction from the anti-tobacco industry. We were trying to think of what is the best mobilization of youth that has ever been around, and it's them. They've done a tremendous job. Many of those people were in Wisconsin and Minnesota. And when we got together with them, and I always think I know what I'm talking about, and so it was just a real great reminder that collaborating with people is such a tremendous thing to do. They said to us that when they talk to young people about the harmful effects of smoking, young people said, zip-de-doo, I'm not going to get cancer, I'm not going to get sick, from smoking. But when they changed that conversation, they said, there is these corporations and these businesses that really are playing you. They don't care about you, and they really don't think you're very smart. That got kids' attention. And that's like that tension I was talking about at the beginning, is that in order to get young people's attention, they have to have a finger to point at someone. And in the initial project, when we piloted it, we started with middle schoolers. And I don't know if you know middle schoolers, but middle schoolers love to stick it to somebody. So if you can just get them turning their nose the right direction, they're born activists, And third graders are too, Madison. So we talked a little bit about marketing to younger children and why they do it. Here's why they do it. So when I start a project, I never start it with answers. I always have a lot of questions. And I have this process when in most of my art exhibitions, I have to be really committed to an idea because it's a lot of research and it's a lot of years of putting it together, creating the art, traveling the show. And so when I had 3 daughters and they were in middle school, and as I started looking at how complicated their lives had become, it was as if the absurd had become the living reality with them. From the moment they started watching television, they were exposed to these characters with negative attitudes. Think about the tone in the cartoons. Think about the scowling, grimacing faces. Think about these perpetuating racial stereotypes, the violence, the over-sexualized images. I mean, this was the world that my young girls were growing up in. And it was very different than the world that I grew up in. And I started asking why. And one of my biggest questions was, why are girls having a hard time getting along? Why do we feel as though we have to be so sexy so soon? Why do we feel like going to the mall and buying things is going to solve our problems? Why is 80% of all young girls dissatisfied with their bodies? So a lot of these whys. And as I reached out, I connected with some national thinkers in this area, and there seemed to be a big change. And one of the big changes was the amount of media that young people were interacting with. It had been a huge change from even 30 years ago. Young people are exposed to, young people see advertising in media. It's in our homes. It's in our schools, it's in every public space. And there used to be regulations that would define some issues as being child appropriate and others not. But now that wall is blurred and there really is nobody defining that. for example, think of somebody that you know who's in high school, or I'm sorry, a sophomore in college. My daughter Ellie was born in 1992. So when she was born, $6.2 billion was being marketed at young children. 5 years later, she's in kindergarten. That number is 12 billion. Now that number is up to about $18 billion. Okay, so as I said earlier, they're going after our younger kids, and they're going younger and younger all the time. The statistics say that you're exposed to about 3,000 messages a day, and this is a huge difference from even 40 years ago. And I get a lot of denial from young kids who will say, "Nah, no, not me. I don't go along with that." And then when I ask them, we have a workbook, and I'll tell you all about all the free resources and things we have on our website. But anyway, when I ask them to go out and spend 15 minutes walking around their school or going to the mall and just taking notes, they usually end up coming back later saying, "I don't think 3,000 messages is enough." So not only are they bombarded with much more images than we ever were, but also the saturation, the amount of money that's being spent on them. I don't know if any of you remember, but when I was a young kid, we only had the 4 stations, and I would always be getting up early in the morning. I still have that curse, and sitting there. And when I tell young people that I would sit in front of a TV with my Lucky Charms, and there would be nothing on the screen, they can't hardly believe that, because what they're used to is this. And sadly, when they see this, they go so excited, because they can tell you all of those TV shows. Magazines have gotten really exciting, beautiful to look at. They are definitely a draw. And as my co-founder likes to say, if you want to cook Italian food while doing yoga and gardening, flower gardening, you can find a magazine that does all those things, I mean, there is just everything that's available. And billboards are getting flashier and bigger and more inappropriate. And I love that when I show that Abercrombie and Fitch, young kids they feel so awkward by that. And I love that bothers them. And I compliment that, because that's bothering their sensibilities. And then what is it that you can do as a young person, as an activist? You can change the channel. You don't, we always think that activism is burning our bras. No, activism is changing a channel. It's not listening to a song. It's something that you find offensive. Take it out of your imagination, or keep it out of your mind. So I work with really young kids, and some people are amazed that I take it so young. But I wrote a children's book, because when I'm out talking, I guess the children's, here it is, Zilly, A Modern Day Fable. When I'm out talking to parents and educators, they say, well, how do we talk to these younger kids about this? And so I've got this PowerPoint, and this is just one piece of it. And, so kindergartners and first graders really can't read, right? But when I ask them and I say, all right, so does the media affect what you eat? And they all say, no, not at all. Yet every single kid in the room knows every single brand, and most of them know what the menu is all about. So it's very effective, and they're really going after our young people. And I always, again, love to get young people. You almost have to create a lot of tension in order for them to pay attention, because there's so many snazzy things out there to distract them. But boy, when they look at this and I read this to them, it really makes them mad, and it really makes them want to step up and do something about it. So direct marketing to youth, it encourages eating disorders, precocious sexuality, family stress, but it also affects anxiety. It affects depression, hypertension. This is all proven. So we really need to take this media literacy seriously. I mean, I will continue to do this until it's in all the public schools, because young people are interacting more with the media than they are with their teachers, than they are with their grandparents, than they are with their parents. And unfortunately, a lot of the messages are very harmful. and they are very profit-driven messages and stories. So, you know, the over-sexualization of girls has been happening forever. I mean, it started in the progressive era. You know, it continues. But let me just show you some of the more recent campaigns that marketers have introduced to parents and to stores. And fortunately, parents have fought back with these, and they've won, and they've pulled all of these items. But these are items that have been brought to stores and tried out for about the last 5 years. So one of them is Abercrombie and Finch. They did these backless underwears. These were marketed to 10-year-olds. Now, if that isn't bad enough, when you read, it says wink, wink, eye candy. I mean, these sort of logos that are on those pants are so inappropriate. You remember the Bratz? Okay, the Bratz dolls, remember them? They pulled them, not because they were rotten or anything. They pulled them because there was a copyright issue. But when I'm working with young girls and I say, tell me about the Bratz dolls. What is it that the Bratz dolls like to do? They'll say, they like to shop. They like to chase boys. They like to have parties in hot tubs. They like to, and this could be, I could be in Arizona. I hear the same thing. I can be in New York. I can be here. I can be anywhere. So again, this whole idea of young people enticing them to try to act older. But fortunately, you know, I work with all these young, amazing girls, and what I get to see every day is so inspiring. And the other day, a young girl, Emma, who was in 4th grade, came to Project Girl, and I'm always asking them, and we'll go over this busted activity that I do with them. I ask them to bring in items, ways that they feel like they want to push back against, the sort of story they want to tell that pushes back against all of this. And she came in with these little Polly Pockets. You know what Polly Pockets are, those little dolls? And so she's in 4th grade, right? And she said to me, and this is what I always want the young girls to be teaching each other. And she brought in these, and she says, you know, I said, Emma, what's your story about those Polly Pockets? And she said, my story is that I live in a world that's trying to get me to grow up too fast. She goes, I love these Polly Pockets, and I like to play with them, but everybody thinks that's kind of stupid. And so, you know, it's like when young girls start connecting to these ideas and figuring this out. So pole dancing, London. This one, take a look at the text. The text is always, we always look at the images, but when you read the text, this one I'm going to fly through. So, you know, where are the real youth, the real bodies, the diversity, the respectful friendships, the parents? Fortunately, I think one of the best way to counter these Hollywood, you know, contrived, not real stories, is just talk about the alternative to them, because it's always better. Because what their stories are always about are the kind of stories that we're trying not to teach our kids. You know, in our schools, in our churches. You know, in a truthful democracy, you know, our young people have to know the truth, and that's what part of why we need to get all of this information to our young people. So we play this activity called Busted, and in our workshops, you know, I really think that you have to have this experience of working with kids and getting them to make stuff, because making stuff is so much more interesting than being talked at. And so one of the activities that I want to do, and I have handouts back there if you want to take things home, and on our website, both the Zilly and the Project Girl have so much free stuff. So, you know, always just go there and encourage young people to go there, because it's not a like, hey, Project Girl, you know, like a marketing, you know, platform for Project Girl. It's more of an interactive place for young people to go. We have got kids who have sent art into our online gallery from all over the country. But these are some of the things that the ways advertisers try to trick us. And so we use this symbol of this rat, and honestly, it's so funny. So you all know that saying, I think I smell a rat, right? You know what that means, right? Be suspicious, be careful, something's tricky. Well, you know, I've made a million mistakes with this project. Young kids have no idea what that statement says. And we went and had rat T-shirts made up. When we go into schools, we'll try to create some suspense. We'll put these Project Girl like rat posters up, and inevitably, like within 3 minutes, parents are calling, are there rats in the school? So I'm not saying this was one of our better ideas, but we're trying to bring this whole rat concept back. So the idea is that, you know, when you're looking at advertising and you're viewing media, look at it with smart eyes, because it's trying to trick you. And again, their intention is to create anxieties, to create vulnerabilities. So here are some of the ways they try to do it. Pressure to be skinny. We all know that everything's Photoshopped. Young kids know that. You know, when you look at we're always seeing just one type of a model, you know, in the media. And there's only 5% of the society of young women that are genetically capable of having that type of body. And of that 5%, none of them could maintain that without going to unnatural and unhealthy ways of eating. Yet when the cultural ideal is this, and that's all you see, you think that that is what you want to be. Too much attention to certain body parts. You know, we see this everywhere, and girls looking weak and confused, they talked about that in the movie. Anyway, so these are a lot of the ways that advertisers do try to trick us. And when I talk to younger people, I say things, same things, but just say them in a little different way. One of the things that really was sort of the genesis of this project, and I mentioned it earlier, was just the fact that young girls are having a hard time getting along. If this room was full of young girls, and I asked this question, can you give me one example of a good relationship between girls in the television shows that you watch, in the books that you read, can you give me an example? And there may be 2 hands that go up. I don't care if there's 500 girls in this room. There is so few examples of girls being supportive and being allies and being respectful to each other. And if I ask that same group of girls, and I'm not exaggerating this at all, give me examples of girls not being kind to each other, the whole room will be up in a roar, every hand will be up. And the risk to this is that when young people see stories, contrived stories from Hollywood that are overly dramatic, stories about girls fighting, girls being disrespectful, catty, backstabbing towards each other, which is a majority of the stories. They talked a little bit about that in the film. That becomes normal and in many cases glamorized, as we see now through reality TV shows and all that trash, right? So it's a problem. And so the alternative to that is I constantly talk to young girls. You know, tell me about your friendships. You know, I tell them that the greatest movements in the history of America happened because of women working together. That's a story. Anytime you have an opportunity to talk to a young person about that, they have to hear these alternatives because they're constantly hearing these other messages. Another thing I like to do. Yes.
Why is it advantageous for advertisers to have girls at each other's throats?
Because they want to create drama. They're trying to get their attention, and so they are just going to such, to get their attention and to, that's why. It's like over-sexualized images. I mean, the images now, they're pornographic, basically. If you want to look at that, I can show you. I didn't put it up very in a big scale, but, we've gotten to a place that I don't know where we're going to go from here. I really see a huge transgression. And I know a lot of people will say, yes, but we have women in politics. We have, we still only have 12% of the women in the Fortune 500 companies who are on the board. 12%, that's a terrible statistics. In Hollywood, until we have more women directing films, 5% of the directors are women, And so what's happening is they're pushing this further and further to get young people's attention. It's that shock value.
Well, I think too that when girls don't get along and they're encouraged not to get along, they're ripe for products that will make them be superior to the other girls. So, of course, you want to buy stuff to prove that your anxiety is not valid, that you in fact are better.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so sad because at a time where we know adolescence is a difficult time, whether you're a girl or a boy. And then to have young girls pitted against each other at that time, where it is a time where they really need each other. You know, and one of the solutions to all of this is to have, like Madison's and Girl Scouts. Girls groups are fantastic for girls because girls are listened to and supported. And I have girls who have had just really horrendous obstacles in their life that I work with. And they come to my groups and they are able to articulate how they feel. They are able to take risks in the conversations that we have in those groups because they've been listened to and they've been supported and their ideas have been taken seriously. So I think that is a huge part. You know, you were talking about our identities. I love this activity, I Am. You know, and we do this in different ways, but, you know, advertisers, they don't want us to feel confident with ourselves. You know, they want to say, if you buy this, you will be popular. If you have this cream, your skin will glow. I mean, they're constantly speaking to us in those terms. Whereas I want to speak to kids, I want them to acknowledge the things about them that they're proud of, the things that they do, not so much how they look. And so it's a difficult introduction to any age. I mean, if I did it to you guys, it would be, you know, but we don't think in far of those terms. But I do that with young people all the time. And then I switch it around. It's like, I want you to catch one of your friends, something, give them a compliment that has to do with nothing about how they look. But you know what? I saw you hold the door for somebody. You know what? I like that. That was good. You know, we need to have them start talking about things in those terms. One of our favorite things to do is we call this commercial land. So these are huge panels. They're about 8 feet tall, and there's 3 of them. So commercial land, I actually created these, but I do these with young people all the time. So commercial land tells the story of this world that surrounds us. And these 3 panels tell the story. It almost acts like a monologue, talking about, you know, talking about the influences that I felt as a young person. Influence that were constantly telling me how I should look, who I should be, how I should, you know, what I should care about. And it's through this experience, after young people learn about the busted and the tricks, then I like to send them out into the world and have them catch those tricks and find those lies, find those tricks. It's almost like, aha, you tried to trick me, but I know what you're doing. Because if we can teach them to connect the dots between the motive that marketers have and the way they're trying to speak to their vulnerabilities, and if they can catch that and separate themselves for a minute and say, oh, I know what you're doing. I know you're trying to make me feel insecure. Then they have the power. They may want to participate. They may want to buy whatever that carrot is. Maybe that carrot is a pair of jeans, or for me, it's always lipstick. You know, but you know, it's that thing that sits in front of you, and you're like, yeah, I think I really want that, and I think that's going to look really good. You know, it's those tricks. If we can get them to bust those tricks, then they're the ones with the control. So I'm going to kind of fly through. These are just some fun sheets that we have. That's a sheet for a thinking space. Is the opposite of commercial land. So, and this is, you know, when I say this, it is hard to miss something you've never experienced. So when young people are interacting with so much media, it's hard for them to understand the value of disconnecting from that. You know, so your thinking space is that place where you go, and and it's important for all of us. You know, that place where you go where you reconnect with yourself, that place where you can be yourself. And I encourage young people to go to wherever that place is. I encourage everybody to go. I need to go to that place tomorrow. I haven't been there in a while, you know, and for me, it's out in the woods on my farm. But, you know, just finding that time to have that time to be thinking. Here are just some statistics on body dissatisfaction, which are alarming because the statistics just get younger and younger and younger. You know, there's very little diversity in the media. You know, diversity and all that means. I think that, you know, I've been looking a lot at African American boys and the mediated images that directly affect their life chances. you know, and it is unbelievable. And we'll be doing a group in Madison of boys looking at these issues, just like we created all of the Project Girl, you know, curriculum and all of that. We're going to be doing some work in Madison on looking at young African American boys, and I've got a group of young men that are going to be helping us with that. So anyway, there's an art exhibition, but I want to allow time for questions. Do you have any questions? That was a great question, and I don't know where we're going to go from here. The other day I had a friend of mine in to look at the mural, and she just said, you know, she almost got teary-eyed, and she just looks and she goes, you know, in the 70s as a woman, I was so excited to be a woman, and she goes, and now I'm seeing these images, and I can assure you that none of us ever saw images like this when we were young girls. I can tell you Hillary Clinton never saw images like this when she was a young girl. So I don't think we even can begin to understand how this is going to affect us. And I love talking to third wave feminists. I love talking to them because you know, it's their perspectives are really interesting and how they view all of this, and that's a whole nother hour conversation. We'd have to have a bunch of them in this room because it's really fantastic. They're doing great things, but I feel like when it comes to the whole sexuality piece, you know, for some reason it's become a liberating thing rather than, and I'm not sure they've got it all the way right, but anyway.
Yeah, even if you take the sexuality part out, just look at how they keep marketing to parents for younger and younger. I've got two nieces, one 4 and one 6.
Yeah.
And so far, so good, but I mean, I can see where the nail polish and the earrings, I mean, they're 4 and 6. I didn't wear earrings till I was 13. I mean, It was a big deal that I got to get my ears pierced at 13, and now I'm, you know, I'd be old. And then on the flip side, I see things that are marketed to my age and up about how to perfect ourselves, you know.
Always.
These skin massagers that will push my eyelids back up or move my cheekbones around so that I can keep being competitive.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like, we're never perfect. I mean, nobody gets to age gracefully, and nobody gets to age at the right time.
And we all get caught up in it. I mean, like, I've been doing this for a long time. I did a whole painting about my, you know, me getting mad at myself for being caught up in it. I mean, it's hard. It's tricky stuff. It's really something else. But, you know, I would never want anybody to leave here. I really believe that, you know, that the story of activism is never a story of one person or one event. I mean, you guys all coming here tonight, you know, is tremendous. And, you know, like all of us, you know, when we get engaged in an attempt to create change, it's through that purpose and that meaning that it brings to our lives that we're going to do something. One time somebody said, you know, Kelly, you're spitting in the wind. And I was like, fine, but I'm going to keep spitting. And I will spit because it's that action of doing something. And I know when we started 11, 12 years ago, the wave, I'll describe it as a wave nationally of people paying attention. This was very small. And it's getting bigger, and it's getting bigger. And so people are, it's moving. You know, we need some policy, you know, issues in Washington to, you know, Tammy Baldwin had some ideas, and, you know, everything's just polarized. But that doesn't mean we can't do things in our communities. I was at Whitewater a week ago, and through the Kennedy Arts Center, there was a grant, and we worked with, I did trainings, workshops with over 50 teachers from Janesville and from the Whitewater area. So many of the teachers in the public schools here in Janesville have been exposed to our curriculum. So that's one thing. If this is exciting to you, the library here has the curriculum. You're welcome to borrow it and use it, and all of the toolkits. So you know, that's something you can do. Madison's going to leave here, and she's going to share this information with her girls, and that's being an activist. I mean, that's such an important thing to do, is when you take your ideas and you share them with others. You know, it makes you feel like you're doing something because you are, and it's helping other girls understand you know, what they're doing. So I'm really proud that you're here, and make sure you thank your parents, because those are our grandparents. Those are good grandparents to bring you to this stuff. So anyway, anybody else?
I think we need to kind of wrap up.
Yeah.
But thank you, Kelly, for
You're welcome.
stimulating.
It's a lot to think about.
Unanswerable kinds of things.
It is.
Presented for
Yep.
us. And
Yep. Thank you for having me.
know that the impact goes on as we keep mulling it over and thinking
Yep.
about it for ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you.